What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday. Welcome to the NFL Brekkie Show alongside Laurie Horesh. I'm Phil Murphy. Laz, we can count the hours now to week 12 of the NFL season, which means after this round of games this weekend, we are 2/3 of the way through the regular season NFL calendar.
We are. It's that time of year where, look, we like to get eyes across every single game and dive in and see that there's not nuggets we're missing, even teams that weren't heralded coming into the season. But it is that part of the year where we can really start to separate the field. We know the teams that really are destined towards heading to rebuild city, and we'll touch on a couple of those later. And then we know the teams that are queuing up, lining up to make their runs. Look, we can cross all the sporting metaphors you want, but it is you're rounding, if not the final bend, maybe the final 600-800 meters of the horse race. You're really positioning yourself and making sure you're not way at the back of the pack, boxed in with no way to get out, and not caught four wide, knowing that you've got a long run home. You're really trying to make yourself primed, proper, and ready to get after it. But with that, we start to circulate around the same teams. We start to mention the same kind of playoff contenders. And I think sometimes we take things for granted. Sometimes we just assume, yep, you'll be there. Yep, you've earned this. Yes, I know these names. They're going to feature. And it allows some perhaps untrustworthy entities to infiltrate a little too deep into your prognostications. It allows you to just welcome a few teams and a few names in that perhaps merited a more scrupulous look, and that we shouldn't have been so trustworthy with our evaluation. And that sums up what we do today. This is an annual show. This is the Phil's Mafia special. Phil bringing the cultural green light for our show theme today. Thank you very much, Philip, and thank you to your family. But where we really do ask, all right, who's the prevailing boss? Who do we really think sits at the top of this thing? And then we've got certain other categories that fill out the rest there, making our way all the way down to who's the rat. Who is the rat that we cannot trust? Who is that team that is sitting there well and truly in the mix, waiting to pull the rug out from under us and throw the playoff picture and the run to the Super Bowl in New Orleans completely up in the air?
So as we start at the top, I think it's who's the Don, who's the boss, and to me, there's a clear choice. And there's another team that I still think is worth mentioning. You when we were planning this, you have the clear choice, which is who?
Sitting at the top here, look, I think there's no team has reached double-digit wins with the loss to the Kansas City Chiefs in this week gone past in that big showdown with the Bills. So I have a look at who's sitting at the top, and I go towards the Detroit Lions. That's who stands out to me as the Don of the league right now. Now, do they have the championship ring to fit on the finger? No, they don't have that sitting there proudly, prominently on the pinky to show off. But the way that they have played football this season, the dominance on offense, the explosive nature on offense, the physicality with which they play, overcoming and addressing some of the injury issues that they've had on the defensive side of things when you lose someone like an Aiden Hutchinson. But they have been the team of this season. They have captured the 2024 season more than anyone else. I think even with the Chiefs and their undefeated start, there was definitely those whispers about this isn't the most dominant showing. This isn't the cleanest victory. There were a couple last gasp victories, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Don't need to go into any particulars there. We've touched on those in previous weeks. No need to roll over old heartache there for anyone on this show. But that loss felt like it could have been coming. And when it comes to the Detroit Lions, I mean, I think what captures the Don, it's that dominant energy from the top. It's that imposing figure. And I think you get that with Dan Campbell off the top. He can welcome you in for an intimate, personal, relatable conversation. But just like that, he's got the switch to bring the decisive aggression and decision-making needed from your godfather of the NFL right now. So I think this team captures it from the top. I think they are, without a doubt, the team that has struck the most fear, the most impressive intimidation with what they bring to the fold. So for me, the Lions earn that moniker this year. They earn that crown, that title, that mantle as the Don of the NFL for 2024.
Laws, and we're coming off a game in which, I mean, Jacksonville looked overmatched. That's an understatement. Detroit, for all of their offensive prowess and how we've been singing their praises this season, they continue to hit new heights. Franchise record for yards in that win over the Jags. 7 straight touchdown drives, none of which was shorter than 64 yards. Those weren't cheapies. 7 straight touchdown drives to start that game. First team to do that since the 2000 Patriots, who, oh, by the way, did not lose a game for the regular season and, did lose in the Super Bowl, but that's the offensive side of things that we're seeing. We see Jared Goff excelling on first down, excelling on play action, excelling passes over 10 yards. And then when they want to run between the tackles, 166 of their 196 yards were between the tackles. And if Detroit can navigate the NFC, I think they are the clear-cut class of the NFC. They're in a position where they could very well get Aiden Hutchinson back for the Super Bowl. I will still make a case. You see my power rankings. I have Lions 1 and Chiefs beneath them, but I am not ready to remove Kansas City from the spot of the Godfather, the Don. I mean, this is a Chiefs team that at this point last season was 7-5. I mean, they did lose a lot of games last season, and they got right come January. And whilst this year's team has shown its flaws, and they were fortunate to be undefeated heading into Buffalo, and didn't get altogether outclassed, but the Buffalo, the better team won in week 11. The Chiefs' problems with pass protection, I think, will persist. There isn't an avenue to recovery there, but some of the bodies who have been out, namely Isaiah Pacheco, are in line to return. And I still do think the Chiefs, who have, according to ESPN Analytics, the likeliest path to a 1 seed, I think Buffalo beating the Chiefs in November in Buffalo doesn't necessarily mean the Bills are going to be the team, or any team is going to beat them, Kansas City, in January in Arrowhead, like they would have to do. And now, listen, on a good day, I'm wearing a Bills shirt. I mean, on a good day, their ceiling is clearly good enough. First team to score 30 against Kansas City in over 2 years. But for me, I still think Kansas City deserves Don status.
Look, when you got the rings and the championship pedigree that you do, that's what made it so hard to move off. It's honestly what makes it hard to move Kansas City out of the number 1 slot for so many weeks during our power rankings. But I think what you bring up there about the Bills, because I think a lot of people ask, well, why aren't the Bills there? They're the team that literally just knocked off the Super Bowl champions. Again, with the Bills, I mean, we know Josh Allen now boasts a 4-1 record, I believe, against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in the regular season.
Yep.
He also boasts an 0-3 record against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs.
And it's kind of unfair to say Allen has an 0-3 record against Mahomes. Allen's been terrific for the Bills in the playoffs, 21 touchdowns to 4 picks. The problem is the Chiefs' offense is scoring 40 a game, and that's not hyperbole. They're scoring 39 points a game against the Bills across those 3 playoff games. So it's that Kansas City offense. Andy Reid always has some cards up his sleeves when they play Buffalo, home, or last year we saw even at Highmark Stadium.
They do. And that's, I think, when we look at how these contenders shake up, what separated from me was sitting there was where are the most glaring weaknesses on the team, or which team do I feel like has the most complete football roster, and the team that I have the faith to come up with really game-splashing plays in critical moments against with an elite crop that I think has separated themselves just a little bit at that class there. That battle for the Don, I think and that's what's going to be so much fun when we get into some of our other characters. That battle for the Godfather doesn't feel like it's a wide open conversation. I think this was a conversation of two and a half teams, basically, and then we move through. But moving through the rest, because now we are going to get down. Now we move to our made men. These are teams that have that playoff pedigree, perhaps not championship pedigree, but playoff pedigree, where we know they're seasoned at this point of the season. We know that they play with enough composure that we can expect them to not just find themselves in week 1 of the playoffs, but advancing to week 2 and week 3. That honestly have shown a consistent ability week in, week out, and honestly over a multitude of seasons to throw themselves into that mix and challenge and present strengths that say we can beat anybody on any given day. So I'm going to throw to you first, Phil. Who's your made man? Who's got that pedigree? Who's got the stamp of approval that we know that we're going to, that has established that identity that we back to waltz themselves in there to January football, and with the quality the inherent quality that we've come to respect over recent years to be taken seriously.
Yeah, Laz, and this one may surprise because I've been openly and I think fairly critical of this team week 4, week 5, week 6. And very quietly, they started to put together a win streak. And very quietly, they started to play to their strengths. And very quietly, even without their starting left tackle, continue to run the ball well. When the quarterback was pressured, continue to execute well. And as they get healthier, they're showing an ability to go win away from home. Home games have been a little bit of a thorn in the side for this team. But I am giving the Eagles made man status. Now, they're not the class of the NFC. That is Detroit, and then there's a gap. But as you start to look at the other teams who on a day can go into Detroit and find a way. We saw Tampa do it early in the season when Tampa was fully healthy. The Eagles, with their young cornerback duo, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, growing up before our eyes, what's really encouraged me with so much, I think, fair criticism, too, of the head coach, Nick Sirianni, watching the dynamic of Jalen Hurts and offensive coordinator Kellen Moore evolve. There was a mic'd up sound from this past week. Philly opening the week way back, Thursday Night Football, Friday morning in Australia, New Zealand, with the win over the Commanders. Jalen Hurts in the sideline saying, "Hey, we need to feed 6," looking up from the film and saying, Devontae Smith is open, and then they go to him on a high leverage down, and then having the on any given day, by my money, the best all-around running back in the NFL, Saquon Barkley, to hand the ball to. Jordan Mailata has been out for 4 of their 6-game win streak. This team's 8-2, and they won. They beat the Packers on a neutral site field in Brazil, and they continue to dominate away from home. You tell me that this team can create a turnover with the skill outside, the 2 bona fide deep threats, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert when he gets healthy, Saquon Barkley, his all-world status, Jalen Hurts playing cleaner football, not the much like Josh Allen actually, his good Josh, bad Josh we saw for years. Jalen Hurts is taking better care of the football and understanding when to rely on his legs. Listen, he's not in that top class. He had a misfire, bad one against A.J. Brown, or targeting A.J. Brown in the first half of that win over the Commanders. But you start to look at the teams in the NFC who could potentially go into Detroit and keep the Godfather Lions from making a first ever Super Bowl berth. For me today, Philly's at the top of the list.
I think that will surprise a few people, but that win streak has been built, like you said. There's so much better protection of the football. Look, Jalen Hurts, he bucked the Brekkie Show tradition. I tipped him to continue his propaganda, popular demand, the history.
Tried to rise against it.
You did. I went with history, and I got bitten by that because they did take care of the football. And quite frankly, like Jalen Hurts didn't. There wasn't a moment in that game where I felt overly confident that turnover was going to come. They are playing more sensible football there, and that increasing comfort, and it goes both ways from quarterback to play caller and play caller to quarterback. You're seeing play out, and that's something Philly can look to benefit from over the back half of this. I mean, this regime change, this from an offensive play caller standpoint, schematic standpoint, like it's 2-3 months old in real life application. We know you have training camp and off season, but from putting action, and we know how limited you are from contact during preseason and training camp, actual proper inimitable reps of hitting football action, NFL Sunday proper snaps. We're 2-3 months into this thing, and I think they have reason to believe and reason with confidence with the health as well, because they have had their receivers miss time. They've had, Goddard has missed time. We know AJ Brown did. Devontae Smith has had his moments this season. And you mentioned the offensive line that has changed names coming into this season, perhaps no higher. I can't remember the last time an offensive lineman departure was treated with as much attention, and meritably so, as Jason Kelsey's did. But they have had change in faces there, and then Mailata missing time. So I think there's reason for promise. They're filling, a huge win over their Commanders, and they also get to operate, as you so often do in the NFC East. If you're one of the good teams, you usually only have to worry about one other good team. Half the division tends to take care of itself. Okay, for me, it's a team we've mentioned already so far. I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills. I think they are, we know what a consistent staple they've been in the playoffs. We know that they haven't made that Super Bowl appearance. We know we know that, for me, it's the clarity of purpose that they have that lands them here. They know what they need to do. They know that it likely at some point will have to go through Kansas City or go against Kansas City, I should say. They're aware that Kansas City can win on the road. That was something that hung over the Chiefs going into last season and their playoff run. Oh, they're not going to be able to do this all the way through Arrowhead this time. They're going to have to go and become road warriors, and they did. So I think there's a clarity that at some point we're going to have to take that performance that we just put down in week 11, and we're going to have to show that on a complete and game-closing nature, and show that football in the postseason. But for the Bills, the offensive line, Josh Allen's MVP caliber play, the running ability in that clutch moment, he grabbed highlights. But that is something that, when we do look at some of these best teams across both the NFC and the AFC, and we look at the haves and the have-nots, his ability to sustain that mobility over his career into the second contract, where we've seen that sapped from other quarterbacks that offer that dual threat capability. He's using it in not break glass in case of emergency, but break glass in case of crucial down and distance. And it just changes the math for them so potently. And I think we'll see that arise in big situational football in the playoffs. But before we get there, we've got a couple more months of regular season football to go. But look, the offensive line, a defense that changed over a lot of big names, and yet we do get a familiar one coming back. We're not trying to, not just because there's a vowel at the end of this name, but appropriate that we are talking about the return of Matt Milano at some point. That poses another boost to a defense that I think has overachieved in some ways, with so many of the names that had seeing herald as safety duos, likes of Poyer move on. And question marks arise at how this Bills team was going to surface replacement talent. And credit to Sean McDermott, they've carried that with aplomb. And there's not much about this team, especially when the added elements we've seen at the not the running back spot, because James Cook has been there, but the quality of that run game, how that's improved over the last couple of years, and the post Stephon Diggs wide receiver core that. We spent time talking about Amari Cooper's arrival, Keon Coleman, a high-end draft pick, but that linchpin that is Khalil Shakir. There's so much across the board here that there's a balance and a clarity to the Bills that make this the perfect made man pick for me. And there's few teams that I'd have confidence in appearing in the final four of this season, quite like I do with the Buffalo Bills.
And Laws, not just to get the win over Kansas City, again, regular season where they've had success, but the perceived weakness, the weakness of this roster coming in was at pass catcher. Year over year, if you rank the top 5 wide receivers, 4 of them left in the offseason, namely Stephon Diggs, who had seemingly great on-field rapport with Josh Allen. They bring in this new crop, rookie offseason acquisition, trade deadline, yada, yada, yada. Keon Coleman, who had been such a key cog in what the Bills have done in recent weeks, they've really hit their stride, didn't play against the Chiefs. Dalton Kincaid, their tight end 1, perhaps their most reliable target, didn't play. So that's when I see the made man who's on the doorstep of being the Godfather. They can do it in less than ideal scenarios, and the Bills did that because of Josh Allen, not just the rushing yards he had, whatever he finished with, but the unscripted scrambles, when it's not a designed run, when the first option is something else, handoff, pass, whatever. He goes 5 carries, 45 yards, and the game-sealing touchdown, 4th and Allen, as they're calling it. That tactful decision to put the game on his back like he did against Arizona week 1, that's the kind of great equalizer that's really demoralizing for defenses. And what works further in the Bills' favor is that the 2 teams against whom they lacked the tiebreaker, who were other division contenders. So we got to finish better than this team, or else they're gonna have the preferred seeding. Baltimore and Houston have both fallen off a little bit, so now the Bills have some gap. The Bills themselves have margin for error. They're closer to getting a 1 seed and a bye than they are to a 3. And when you look at that AFC wildcard picture, I do think there's a gap between the Chargers, Ravens in that top 2 wildcard spot, and then whoever gets that last spot, whether it's Denver, Miami, Cincinnati, or Indianapolis, that whoever it is, I think the Bills would prefer than any of the other teams. So it's all kind of setting up for them that this may be the year.
I think what you captured there, you said in adverse circumstances, in less than ideal circumstances, this team can deliver. And that's what you want from your senior leadership. Maybe not from we haven't crowned them the Don, either of us, but from a senior leadership position, you want to know that, hey, we can put you in a spot where you're going to have to battle uphill a little bit and overcome and get creative. And that's something that with their diverse array of attack and in the outside of Josh Allen, the superstarless offense and to a degree, superstarless, at least in their prime defense that they operate. They've shown the ability to overcome, like you said, missing pieces that can be linchpins at time, and yet they're creative and balanced enough to overcome in other opportunities. Okay, let's moving now. Now we're getting into these more flawed areas, perhaps more colorful areas, but now we're getting into the muscle fill. So for you, when you look at a team that is just going to, perhaps you're not trusting them with the truly elite week-to-week performances. But when it comes to, we're going to take you to deep waters, we're going to get physical, we're going to leave an imprint, and you'll be feeling the contest we gave you for weeks to come. Which team jumps out to you and says that that's not just the mentality and the reputation, but the lasting impact, the aftertaste that they'll be leaving on their opposition?
Yeah, well, these are the enforcers. These are the guys in the family. You send to do the dirty work, but you can't really trust the grand top-down scheming. You don't want to meet them in a back alley. You want to avoid, when you see the playoff bracket, you would prefer to avoid this side, because even if you win, they're going to take their pound of flesh. I mean, it's going to be a heavyweight fight. They're going to get in their body shots. There are a couple that jump out. For me, I'll go with the team that just had its biggest statement win of the season. You talk about a team that leave you black and blue. How about the black and yellow? And now having us question have we seen the recipe to slow down Lamar Jackson's MVP campaign? I don't know about that, but Jackson just can't sort out this Pittsburgh team. 49% completion rate for Lamar Jackson, lowest of the season. First game with multiple turnovers since Week 18 last year, which, oh, by the way, also was against the Steelers. Lamar Jackson looked human on the deep ball. Balls off target, had 7 of them, 6 in the first half, under pressure. We know Pittsburgh's defense with a defensive player of the year caliber edge rusher and TJ Watt and all that he can do with the sacks, and Alex Highsmith on the other side. JPJ, what a perfect fit we've said he was there since the draft. Patrick Queen comes in. As Mike Tomlin put it, one man's trash is another man's treasure. The reclamation projects everywhere, just the buy-in. And you even said, you alluded to, I think, in the Made Man conversation about these teams come in with Philly and camp and things are kind of slow, no contact, take up a couple weeks to get their feet underneath him. In Latrobe, Pennsylvania, Mike Tomlin runs a famously physical camp. And it's why the Steelers perennially come out, outperform teams early in the season. They're a little bit more accustomed to contact, get a couple wins under their belt. And here they are. He's been head coach since 2007. They haven't had a losing season. And if Pittsburgh beats Cleveland Thursday night here in America, Friday morning where you're watching, Laws, it will guarantee that Mike Tomlin will remain without a losing season for the entirety of his tenure. And the Steelers as a franchise will match the Cowboys of the 70s, the John Facenda, America's team Cowboys. Tom Landry, longest streak, 21 seasons without a losing record. They are consistent. They are well coached. They are dialed in. They are physical. The reason that they're the muscle and not a made man, and Mike Tannenbaum has tipped them as an underdog to upset either the Bills or the Chiefs and make it into an AFC championship game. I'll buy it because they're playing a wild card game at home. And then, man, I could see them giving Josh Allen hell or giving Patrick Mahomes fits and Chris Boswell 5 field goals, getting him a 15-13 win. I can wrap my head around that. The problem is this team still remains limited offensively, and the moonball works against a bad Ravens defense. But Laz, we get to the red zone. Steelers, again, 0-for-3 in the red zone. They've won twice this season without scoring a touchdown. It's kind of a backhanded compliment. In the red zone, Russell Wilson, 2 for 9 passing, 2 for 9 in the red zone for 7 yards, no touchdowns, and a bad pick. On the season, he's a 29% passer in the red zone. That's the worst in the NFL. It's worse than Jameis Winston and gosh, who else was down there? Deshaun Watson. Just stick with the Browns, easy enough. Giving up a lot of pressure. Wilson, when pressured, he was pressured 13 times against the Ravens, went 1 for 8 for -1 yard. So, and he had a pick there as well. So while there's so much to like about this team's physicality and the coaching and the culture and how tough of an out they're going to be, to string together 3 wins with those offensive limitations which remain, I don't see it. That's why they're the muscle.
I think when you think Steelers football, I mean, it's one that you'd underline and jump out. And they're a defense that, in this day and age, when it's so hard for defensive performance to carry from season to season, defensive stats are often the least sticky. They're one that have absolutely met expectations. Before I get into mine, Loz, can you move to your right? I'm trying to see what's on the TV behind you. I'm going backwards. The camera and me are not in sync directionally. I'm not sure you can see that, but that is, read into it or you will, a varying roving New York City skyline. And, just an homage to today's show. All right, for me, the muscle, and this is the team that we've been spending increasing amounts of time, the muscle for me is the LA Chargers. I think we talked about they will take you to deep waters. That defense, despite the fact that they're just coming out of a shootout victory against the Cincinnati Bengals, I think we saw in the first half that defense and the early exchanges of that game really put the strangle down on a Bengals explosive operation that eventually did break through. But so much of this season, this is a team that, despite a secondary that was absolutely that was highlighted with whatever your favorite colored bright text or highlighter is, as one to take advantage of coming into the season. They have, from big name contracts that have gone bad in recent seasons to big names currently on the roster that needed to turn around their form. Think of someone like a Derwin James, to unheralded DBs. There's a lot of question marks there, but they've certainly outperformed. I mean, this was a team, if you talk about muscle, they had Khalil Mack just sitting there flexing on the sideline, not playing in that game, watching on as that pass rush got after Joe Burrow. Look, this is a team that with Jim Harbaugh's style of football, both defensively, and they rank just in the top 10, top 5 of just about every defensive metric, even after, giving up 27 points, was it, against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 11. And then offensively, we've seen, and we had our quarterback draft, and I'm feeling pretty good about my selection of Justin Herbert. I think he took him 6 overall. We saw the expansive, ridiculous arm of Herbert on display in that shootout there. But so much of this season, they have reliably and with commitment turned to a run game led by J.K. Dobbins most of the time. We've seen Gus Edwards start to feature in a little more, but plenty of power in what they look to achieve there. And a run game that, if you watch, and perhaps this is perhaps from the perspective of someone who may have invested in J.K. Dobbins in fantasy this season, but you watch throughout that game that Dobbins they'll be running away. It won't be massively explosive. Perhaps he'll be going for about 3 or 4 yards of carry for some part of the game. But so often it'll be in that late third or fourth quarter that we'll see that line break. The defensive line will break. That Jim Harbaugh invested offensive line will create the necessary room. And whether it's Dobbins or Edwards or whoever, we even saw Justin Herbert in recent weeks, the running game will break through and start to deliver those kind of telling blows. This time it was at 18 seconds left with Dobbins breaking through on the left from a fair way out and screaming in for a touchdown. But there's a ferocity that they play with, and perhaps that comes from the top down with someone like Jim Harbaugh. But there's a knowledge and a commitment that they're going to play hard and physical football, that they're not going to waver off that style. They have the absolute potency. We've seen Ladd McConkey coming on, Quentin Johnston's career being, I wouldn't say resurrected because he's so young in his career, but talk about a U-turn in terms of projections and hope for his prospects in the future. We know that element exists. Will Dissly's been a sexy pickup in your fantasy league for those desperate at tight end this week. We've seen those moments, and we know that capability is there. But the essence of this team is that they will routinely keep your team to 10 points or less for the long opening extensions, most of the first half, if not the first half entirely. While they run their offense, it allows them to play their brand of football, not be moved out of their style of football. But they still do have I guess from a muscle standpoint, if they do get, dragged into uncertain terrain, or if they do find themselves overmatched, or if they do find themselves a team that is feeling themselves and feeling a little confident, they have that strike capability to hit back. So I think this starts with the stylistic trend and theme that Jim Harbaugh and that Chargers team has built, but also throw in a little sprinkling that they do have that explosive capability to strike you and knock you out in one blow.
In Laws, they start fast. I mean, their game script is, we're going to score first. And usually that's a reflection of good coaching and good game planning, whether you want to say, Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert kind of on the right page, or conversely on the other side, the defense starting hot. But their numbers in the first quarter are amongst the best in the NFL. And then when they have a lead, to defend like they do and run the ball like they do, it's why their win-loss number looks like it does. And now we're getting the excellent equalizer of the Justin Herbert arm with 6 passes of 20-plus air yards, which is the most in the NFL, and a 51% completion rate on those 20-plus air yard passes, which is third best in the NFL. So now the aerial threat, which is only going to open things up for the run game, they're probably still a year away. But this team isn't your traditional muscle. Like, it's not bulky and hulking. It's cerebral, and for me, it's not even derogatory to say, put them in this muscle category. It's honestly saying that they're ahead of schedule. Like, they should not be this good this early, but we know they're going to be a tough out. And this is really a team to circle and look out for in the next 2 to 3 seasons to potentially make a run, not just at, being amongst the AFC elite, but winning the AFC and getting into a Super Bowl.
Absolutely. I think this is a team that has laid enough tape in the past when it comes to people like Justin Herbert that that's within them. And what they're going about proving this season is they can play within a more balanced physical game plan, and then allow that talent to grow within that. I had someone say or ask us a question last week. What do we think the future looks like? Imagine this Chargers team, which has, I think, about $75 million in cap space at their, not including carryover space, at their disposal for the 2025 season. What if they go get, a highline receiver, or what if they go, and my initial reaction was like, I don't circle them as necessarily being at the top of the T. Higgins type of bidding market in free agency next year, because I'm not sure that's what Jim Harbaugh is going to want to execute. I think you got to be feeling good about the turnaround of the turnaround of Quentin Johnston and Ladd McConkey coming on increasingly. I think when healthy, we know what that offensive line can do. It's just about continue, and I feel like that's exhaustive with the Chargers, but that talent is displayed there. The likes of Alt, we know that talent there, but getting the increasing cohesion and reps out there for that offensive line. But I wonder about the defensive spending that they would look at perhaps first, an overachieving unit, but certainly one that you could look to add a couple more pieces to going forward. But I think it's just a team that they're like you said, they start fast, but they're not moved out of their style of football. Very rarely are they. And they're, like you said, it's a cerebral muscle, and we've seen those characters in movies and in TV shows over the time. It's not just the biggest muscle that turns up. It's the guy that knows how to get the job done, and that's them right now. Okay, moving on to our fourth category here. We get to, I'll allow you to introduce, because this was a Phil Murphy edition for this season, to fill out a more complete picture of our ranks.
Yeah, and Lodge, we have 2 categories left, and we'll go through them pretty quickly because I know we're already more than half an hour deep. But in past years, we've had the Rat, which is a team on the surface that looks for all their parts like a contender, but there's just something about them that we don't trust. We think that they are going to betray us and betray themselves and their fan base at some point along the way. That's the Rat, who on the surface, they have everything. There was a gap there. So I went with the Soldato, the soldier, somebody who, them in the family. They're in. They're bought in. There's nothing about them that is deceptive, but they're also not quite at that made level. They deserve acknowledgement. They will They will be a factor. They will be involved, but there's some clear, known fatal flaw that's keeping them from getting to the next step. For me, that's the Packers. And Jordan Love, for all his arm talent, this was the year that we thought, with young team, year in the system, getting a year older, pushing San Francisco to the brink in the divisional round last year, that this was the team. By the way, rematch in San Francisco this weekend, 8:25 a.m. Monday on ESPN. This was the team that perhaps would ascend to the NFC. And even those who were high on the Lions, it was like, all right, this is 1-1A in the NFC. I think the Lions have exceeded expectation, and the Packers have failed to meet them. And, in one sense, you look, and Jordan Love on the deep ball against the Bears was working. And listen, the Bears are a far better team this season at home than on the road. Week 11, Soldier Field, windy conditions. Love was throwing right through the wind. Deep ball was good, 6 of 6, 182 yards. He was great under duress. Play action was there. But Laz, again, just another inexplicable red zone interception on third down, no less, throwing well short of the sticks, just sails Tucker Kraft right into the arms of a defensive back, leaving 3 points on the board. And I don't think it was a situation. It was a high-risk play where, okay, small window, let me get it to a receiver either in the end zone or beyond the marker. It was an inconsequential catch. Kraft was likely going to be tackled 5 yards shy of the marker. To be off base again and throw another interception again and lead the NFL in picks again. 8 straight games now with an interception. Loss. This is the Eagles a year ago. And I don't think the Packers are going to fall off to the degree that Philly did, losing 6 of their last 7. But I don't think the Jordan Love turnover bug is going to be fixed in the next 7 weeks. I think Green Bay will putz along and hold on to a wild card spot. I think Washington has shown that maybe they weren't quite ready. They could fit in the Soldato area as well. They're going to kind of recede. Packers will be 10-7, which is fine, but then it's going to be a quick playoff exit to somebody, some division winner. Philly, perhaps in a rematch of the season opener from Brazil. Even whoever the NFC West champion is, whether it's San Francisco or Arizona. We're going to get a look at that this weekend. I am off the Packers for this year because of this fatal flaw. They're a soldier. If they can tighten things up, they can get made, but I don't think this is a quick fix. I think it's going to take some time.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's it. I think we all have that organizational belief in the Packers that this will trend in the right direction, much like the soldier has full commitment to the organization, to the family. So I think that makes a ton of sense. But this has been, there's a couple of teams like this as we've ushered in this new era of young quarterbacks, either in their first or second year of starting in the NFL. There's been a couple that have been a little rocky and a little linear. Progress isn't linear. It doesn't just shoot straight upwards. You do have ups and downs, and taking care of the football is a big part of that. And that's certainly something that stood out for a team that, like we said, there's a lot of inherent belief going both ways when it comes to the Packers. But for this season, and look, this is coming from someone who picked the Texans over the Packers in the Super Bowl before the season. I think those teams both potentially could have fallen into this mix. For me, though, I'm going with the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, they have been, they're going to get a lot of plucky respect for the Arizona Cardinals sitting there in the NFC West and what they've been able to put down in the 2024 season. And, Kyler Murray playing his best football, is sitting atop a division that is incredibly competitive, and we'll see how that tracks the rest of the way. I think there's 2 reasons why it has me at soldier level. I think Jonathan Gannon, and it certainly has that team on that trajectory going towards, like we said, there's belief, there's commitment. He's done a fantastic job after being, a punchline early in his time after his hire down in Arizona. And it goes beyond Kyler Murray. It's the production, the consistent production out of a run game that is adding new talent behind the likes of James Conner. It's players like Trey McBride. It's the Michael Wilsons of the world stepping up at wide receiver 2 behind Marvin Harrison Jr. There's a lot to like about the Cardinals team, but I think there's a limit here. One, I think, that offensive line, I don't think that allows a platform for consistent success at the level of those upper echelon offenses. It's a team that, I've got the stats in front of me here, but the Arizona Cardinals are in that kind of bottom third of the league in terms of pass protection. I think we do see that a little too often, and I think, look, it's a year where we've seen the running game continue to trend back towards central relevance, and that's something that no one likes to tackle James Conner, and you've got Benson behind him coming along. Not to mention your friend Mari DiMarcado, who had his moment. What did you say? They were basically, it was like third and kneel. They were basically
it was the Cardinals were, it was like one of those probing run plays, like, hey, if we get 8 to 10 yards, maybe we'll try a field goal. They were at their own 47, and Chicago went deeper than the deepest, wider than the widest.
Yeah.
And DiMarcado just ran through everybody, 53 yards to a touchdown. That was your backbreaker at the end of the second quarter.
Yeah. So there's elements to their team that make them really unpleasant to deal with, and Kyler Murray's running ability, situational running ability, red zone running ability as well. But I think from a weaponry standpoint and from an offensive standpoint, I just don't think they're at that level. I think they're both question marks enough that it caps their ceiling a little bit. Offensive line that's performing in the bottom third, and then a wide receiver core that behind Marvin Harrison Jr. Credit to Michael Wilson. I don't know that I think he's more of a 3 than a 2. I think there's probably some added, and I don't think there's a great deal of depth beneath that. Trey McBride obviously is stepping up as one of the elite tight ends in the NFL, but there's perhaps, particularly when you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. in a rookie year as well, there's a little lack of punch there, and that pass blocking unit on the offensive line, it's just enough to hold back, and I think they're contributing factors to why I think we see the ceiling of this team not as high as others. And again, this is also a team that I think we use that phrase, 3 words, ahead of schedule. So there's no shame in that. They're a soldier for me, though. I think they'll absolutely make noise, whether they hold on to that lead in the NFC West or throw themselves into the wild card picture, where they're a team that you really don't want to have to deal with some of the mercurial nature of their contributors, but it's the down-to-down consistency and diversity of those contributors that just holds them back. Not to mention, I've spent time talking about the offense. Defensively, not an overwhelming prospect there, not an overwhelming unit, and one that I think we'll see invested in continually over the next couple seasons.
Yeah, ahead of schedule is fair. Lost 15-16, weeks 15-16, they have Panthers-Pats. So that's good for a team that's 6-4, the one game that's up. For the 3 games to get there, one of these weird scheduling quirks, they play the Seahawks twice in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's the bread to a sandwich with the Vikings in Minnesota in the middle. So,
and then that game against the 49ers, 5th of January.
Week 18 divisional games always mean that. And that's the week after the 49ers play the Lions on Monday Night Football. So San Fran coming in Monday night. We know how
teams teams fare after playing the Lions, Phil?
Yeah. Not great to this point. But the Cardinals we're really going to see in the next 3 weeks, because it's a moot point. It's a moot point if they're 6-7 coming out of these Vikings-Seahawks game, because that means the Seahawks have won twice and at worst are 7-6. So that's the season for the Cardinals is really going to be decided in 3 weeks, which in their favor, good run of form, now rested on a bye, extra time to prep for Seattle. But here's where the rubber meets the road for them. Lastly, we have the Rat.
Yes.
And I kind of already painted the picture of the Rat. Who is your Rat, Laz?
It is the Atlanta Falcons. I tossed up a couple of different contributors here, a couple of different options here who could really stand out to me, because there are some untrustworthy teams. The Houston Texans merit. There's another AFC team that we might touch on in just a moment. The Texans certainly jump out as might be one of the more unconvincing 24-point victories you'll see in the NFL against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football. There, but for me, it is the Falcons. I think, be wary of the team coming out of the softest division in football, which I think we can safely say the NFC South looks quite that way. At the moment, we'll see what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can do with Mike Evans coming back, whether they can right the ship there. But look, this is a team that still comes up with ways to lose against teams they have absolutely no right to. I mean, whether it is Bijan Robinson leaving the field at almost inexplicable moments, whether it is the Kyle Pitts, disappearing and reappearing act some weeks ago. Oh, they finally clicked into gear with how they'll use him. Drake London's been one of the more consistent, certainly his most consistent and effective season. But getting absolutely pummeled by your Denver Broncos, like outclassed, outcoached on every single level in a 38-6 drubbing. Throwing away victories, bad situational football, bad handling of late drives against the New Orleans Saints to go down 2017 there. They've whittled away their what should have been a bigger advantage in the NFC South. And one of the things that makes me the inefficient at times usage of some of their talent is one thing. But the thing that really eats at me and the thing that sits at my core, why they jump out as the rat to me, I think I was diving in, looking at some offensive line play of late, and they're trending in the wrong direction with how it's been over the past, what they've been able to deliver on third down has jumped out. They're middle of the pack, actually worse than average. They're sitting about 18th. We're talking about situational football and third down conversion rate. That's actually trending in the wrong direction over the past month. They're actually slipping towards that bottom third, down in the low to mid 20s with how they're operating there. But what really eats at me is the fact that you have these bad games, these two week stretches where they drop results, either the games they shouldn't have lost or shouldn't have lost that handily. And immediately it starts to jump out. Do we need to see Michael Penix? Does Kirk Cousins need to be traded? That type of potential, I don't want to say it's a mutiny, but that type of conjecture, that type of questioning coming out that quickly at the most important central position in the sport. For someone with Kirk Cousins, who after a rocky couple of weeks, we were talking on a show with Ben Solak, he was talking about, look, we'd seen Kirk turn around, maybe we were, too quick to jump on that this was another, veteran quarterback given too much money off an Achilles injury. As soon as it starts to slow down again, then immediately we get these questions of put Penix in. Oh, is Cousins going to be a trade? Is he going to be a movable trade asset in the offseason? That's what tipped the edge for me, is that all these teams that we're talking about, they're the one that has this glaring quarterback issue that does not go away. And that's natural when you have a quarterback picked in the top 10 and a rookie sitting there with a veteran who, yes, he has $100 million guaranteed, but is a new face in the building and there's question marks over. The fact that arises, it just makes me feel so uneasy about pushing any chips in behind the Atlanta Falcons, despite the fact they sit at the top of the division and a weak division as it is in the NFC South. The idea that they will make some noise when that infrastructure seems to be built a little house of cards-ish, it just holds me back, and it gives me a more uneasy feeling than any of these other would-be contenders that we feel are a little flimsy. Those teams, I don't have a question that there's elements within that locker room wondering if it's time to pull the rug out on the starting quarterback. For the Atlanta Falcons, I think that's very much at the center right now. It's very pertinent. It's very prevalent. It's very, very concerning. They are my rat. I do not trust them.
Well, they're 2-4 outside the NFC South. I'm not disagreeing with your assessment that they're flawed, but I don't think there's any deception that they were a contender. That, like, against Denver. Now, listen, I'll be as a Broncos supporter, I'll be the first to celebrate Bo Nix, first rookie ever, 300 pass yards, 80% completion rate, 4 touchdowns. His CPOE was +7, which means his expected completion rate against that defense and throws he was making 77%, which is really high for an expected completion rate. You look at his map, he spread the ball out well. It drove the ball downfield. Bo Nix played very well in that game, but the Falcons were without their top 3 corners, lost Kevin King, a 4th corner in that game. A team that's already amongst the worst pass rush units in the NFL. Over the 3 years before this year, they had 18 fewer sacks than anybody. They blitzed Bo Nix, I want to say twice. It was all standard pass rush, and Nix was picking them apart. So for me, if the Falcons are a rat, it's kind of like a Snape from Harry Potter. Like, you know who the bad guy is. It's not subtle. It's not, there's no deception. It's a really weird, it's like, you have to almost like suspend belief to be like, oh yeah, the bad guy did
Snape had a little face turn there at the end though. The long game was showing that there was a little merit there in the long run. But they didn't really hide his demeanor. They didn't hide his flaws very quietly.
Right. It's just like theatrically sinister. That's the Falcons. Like clearly the rat. For me, I'm gonna go with the Ravens. The Ravens, if a lot of it is that they're just a high ceiling, low floor team. And you look at all the pieces, Lamar Jackson still likely to win an MVP. I know we get to the spot where somebody's presumed an MVP and then he has a bad game and then it's who else can take it? Josh Allen overtakes him in the odds. And then once we really start to get things down the stretch, I'm not saying Allen won't win it, but Jackson, if we pause the season now and ignored the trajectory of the Allen just having beaten Kansas City and handing them the first loss, it's not really close statistically. Derrick Henry doing what he does, but this Ravens team, we know the secondary is bad. Pass yards per game allowed is a little deceptive because winning teams who are ahead have to defend the pass a lot. And just like, teams that are behind, Brad Bolt, shouts to you, Panthers most rush yards per game allowed. I don't think they're the worst rush defense in the NFL. They're behind in the fourth quarter a lot. So teams are running the ball a lot. Therefore, teams are getting a lot of rush yards per game on them. But the Ravens definitely have among the worst pass defenses in the NFL. And you throw in the fact now, here's my rat stat laws, most penalties accepted against. That's rat behavior. That is, showing up to the scene after the bust, after the FBI or CIA, whoever busted up the family business, and you show up late and they got stuck in traffic, or it's like that's the kind of thing with the Ravens. They're the best 7-4 team, which is kind of a backhanded compliment. But they find a way to lose a lot of games. And that's just the rat behavior. On paper, you're gonna say, okay, when the playoffs start, probably KC 1, Buffalo 2, and then man, the Ravens are a dangerous team at 5. Yep. Don't overlook the Ravens going into Houston, and they're gonna beat the Texans, and then look how close they played Kansas City in week 1, and Isaiah Likely's shoe size cost them a game. We're gonna get all this belief, and then the Texans are gonna beat them by 13. That's the kind of season I foresee for Baltimore. Pittsburgh, ESPN Analytics has Pittsburgh, if they beat the Browns, to open week 12 tomorrow. Pittsburgh's 77% chance to win the division. So now Baltimore's got to go on the road in all likelihood 3 times to get to a Super Bowl. I smell a rat.
Here we go. Adam Schultz saying Mike McDonald had a lot of influence as DC. It appears defense looks like it will be their Achilles heel in the postseason. Adam also wanted to know that Phil's hair looks absolutely immaculate. And Brad also wanted to say, to be fair, Phil's hair always looks immaculate. So, yeah, I'm not going to say you put extra effort into the salad today, Phil. But
no, I think it's the lighting. I'm not in my normal home studio. I'm at work. Just shot an episode of The Blitz. So I have the fresh, ESPN industrial hair product and some really harsh overhead lighting, which actually kind of worked for the mob theme.
The theme of the show today. Yeah, I will say I know that we've got the digital cut of the rookie rewind from veteran defensive lineman from the Miami Dolphins, Calais Campbell, that's dropping today. A little bit of a different cut than you guys ran, just throwing a couple little more wrinkles in there. But you've been able to see these rookie rewinds on NFL Blitz all through the season. And you guys have another one that I think you're running in the next 24 hours or so that features Nick Sirianni and Sean McVay ahead of the Rams-Eagles meeting coming up. So tune in there. We'll make sure to share that one, but plenty of good content, as well as all the big game previews that you've got lined up for us over the next little bit, Phil. So thank you, as always, for that. Look, for me, I think that it comes down to that defense. When we were talking about the Ravens defense a couple of weeks ago, the number was 280.9 yards a game, just shy of 281 passing yards given up a game, which led the league. It's gotten worse. They're now near 285 yards. And when you just think about, I don't know, I think we've made this presumption going into seasons in the past, but I think it's really coming into form now. Just think about what the AFC is going to look like. Like, think about what those quarterbacks, what those passing games are going to look like, that they're going to have to string 3 in a row together, contain them at some rate. Like, can you win 3 straight shootouts? And credit to Lamar Jackson, Todd Monk, and the entire offense there. The offensive line, Derrick Henry, the entire offense in Baltimore. But can you win 3 straight shootouts to get to the big dance? when it is going to be the likes of Josh Allen and the Bills, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, Justin Herbert and the Chargers, a very cleverly designed, yes, he's new, Bo Nix, but the cleverly designed Sean Payton offense. Who else have we got in the AFC wildcard mix?
Well, I think the Steelers are going to win the AFC North. So yes. I'm saying I'm giving the Ravens your 5 or your 6 seed, which means game 1 is at Pittsburgh, or at Houston.
Yep.
And that's the one I'm sleeping on even as the Rat. The Ravens would probably be favored in that game.
And that's,
but I'm saying, hey,
I don't like that matchup. I do not like
Nico Autry and Will Anderson, if healthy, and CJ Stroud shown that QB1 medal.
Nico Collins further removed.
Nico Collins getting healthy. Like that's the game that I'm saying as the Rat, you're gonna say, oh, you can start penciling in an avenue. The Ravens are dangerous. They're gonna be a dark horse. Like, I don't know, man. 7-4 that is just they're losing. It's like if they ever have a chance to stub their toe, they do. Yep. Whereas the Chiefs found a way until the Bills got them. And the Bills, the Bills lost to the Ravens early in Baltimore. They lost to the Texans, but they've figured it out and they've evolved and they're finding ways to win. Whereas Baltimore's finding ways to lose. And that for me is Rat behavior. A team that has all of the pieces, and then they find a way to fail at the most inopportune time because
it's one thing to be able to score with anybody. It's another thing to have to against the best teams in the NFL for a month straight. Oh, and there we go, Phil. Our family is constructed.
It is, and we're an hour in. Hot take time brought to you by Macca's.
Let's go quickly.
Yeah, Lewis Glover says, quote, I don't trust the Ravens and I can't quit the Bengals. Lewis, clearly we agree we can't trust the Ravens. Lewis has given those they were late to the drop. I tried calling the phone, the burner phone they gave me, and nobody picked up. One of those. Smells a little fishy.
Why can't he quit the Bengals? Well, let's parlay it into our next hot take. Or this was a trust theme, the hot trust hotline this week, because we got from Vince. Can we pause for a minute and just appreciate how ridiculous this is? You've got Jamar Chase on pace for the Triple Crown. Joe Burrow has over 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, only 4 picks. Trey Hendrickson leads the league in sacks, and yet the Stripey Cats are 4-7. Please make it make sense. Please, my head hurts. Well, and parlaying into that, why you can't quit the Bengals. So, yeah, those are the headline acts. But what happens afterwards? Well, T. Higgins has been injured. That offensive line has been far from consistent. They are a passing offense. The running offense, Chase Brown's been a nice story, but they rank in the bottom 10 in terms of rushing productivity per game. So there's imbalance there. The success rate is more middling than you might expect for a team that does, feature so highly in passing. They are the number 1 passing yardage team per game in the NFL. So you have those top line stats, and then defensively, you got Trey Hendrickson there, who's leading the league in sacks with 11.5. They have one other player with multiple sacks. That's Sam Hubbard. Do you know what that number is? 2 sacks. That's the lowest multiple number you can have, Phil. That's the lowest you can have. So, and don't tell me 1.5 is multiple, because it's not really. So you've got no production, and it's not just sacks, because I think people can say, sacks one thing. What about pressures and quarterback hits? Well, quarterback hits, Trey Hendrickson also leads the league with 24. The next best is again Sam Hubbard with 8. When it comes to pass rush win rate, yes, Trey Hendrickson is up there in the top 5, top 10 on the season. There's nobody. I think the next is BJ Hill at 7%, ranking, I think, outside the top 70. So you just have so little. And then from the defensive side, the injuries that have mounted in that secondary, along with the form. Look, Cam, I've been day one bandwagon on there with Cam Taylor-Britt, but his performance has massively trailed off in a high-profile situation and high leverage moments there, going freewheeling and leaving some very deep and open targets there at the back of the Cincinnati Bengals secondary. But like Dax Hill, DJ Turner, I believe, also injured. So you're seeing some of their promising talent that is finding a home falling out of the picture as well. So I think that's why yes, you see these top-end stats there and these highlight performances, but 3 stars does not a contender make. And that's been That's been the underlying theme of this Bengals team.
But I also think it's just in Vince's defense, it is just kind of inexplicable. If you look at all the quarterbacks ever with more than 3,000 pass yards, 25 passing touchdowns through 11 games, Joe Burrow's there. Cincinnati's 4-7 record stands alone as the worst of those teams. Been a couple 5-6s in there, never a 4-7 at this point. Joe Burrow's also already tied an NFL single season record with 7 games left. I mean, we're 10/17 through the Bengals calendar. They're mercifully on a bye this week. 4 times Burrow's had 300 pass yards, 3 touchdowns, and lost. And that's why when he's pressed for the Chargers post game, he's clearly frustrated. There's not a single thing to which he can point to say it's not on him. I mean, if this team were 7, if there's no DPI against the Chiefs, if Money Mac hits the first field goal, the field goal attempt against the Ravens, you just go down the line. The 2-point conversion's good against the Ravens. Even if they're 7-4, and you could throw in a Mike Gesicki fumble against the Patriots week 1, or if Terry McLaurin's target is knocked down on 3rd and 7 against the Commanders, you could throw in a couple. Hey, maybe there's a way here, but I mean, objectively, 3 or 4 wins. If they're 7-4, not 4-7, Joe Burrow is not just in the MVP conversation. He's probably the favorite. But here, as we stand, the Bengals, who you mentioned their pressure problems, allowed 21 pressures to the Khalil Mack-less Chargers. The Bengals are out of margin. I don't think 9-8 is getting it done in the AFC. You have Chargers, Ravens for the top 2 spots, and then the Broncos, who are playing with a lot of confidence, and Denver's next 2, Raiders, Browns. Feel okay about those. That's a team you have to catch.
Yep.
For the Bengals, they still got to play the Steelers twice. They got to play them week 13 and week 18, and they play the Broncos. So it's the Bengals are out of what ifs. They have to run the table and get help, and it's a long table to run. So that's why Vince, make it make sense. Your head hurts, brother. Like ibuprofen, Tylenol. I can't make it make sense. It's an anomaly, and it's going to end, I think, with Joe Burrow in a January tee time, not as part of a wild card, which is unfortunate because as a neutral, he's a terrific player to watch.
Absolutely. I mean, we got a sample of that against the Chargers in prime time, one of the games of the season, and one that had you absolutely glued. And not just because of the productivity, it just showed mettle and it showed toughness with the way that they were able to compose, come back, and say, right, let's show this game-breaking ability and get back in this thing in a hurry. All right, next one here on this trust concept. Steelers can't go on a run. They'll have the weakest QB in the AFC playoffs by a fair way. Basically have one. Granted, he makes some excellent plays. Wide receiver. That's from B. Arthur. Phil, can the Steelers, your muscle pick, can they actually go on a run with the Russell Wilson-led offense? Well, actually, sorry, the Chris Boswell-led offense.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the Chris Boswell-led offense. Go on a run. I mean, we're talking. Mike Tannenbaum again has said AFC Championship game. I mean, the avenue would be what? Whoever loses the Chargers-Ravens game seems like they're in line for that 6th seed. I say that because they have a game on, we'll say the Broncos for 7. They both have a game on the Broncos at least, and they both have a tiebreaker over the Broncos at the moment. Broncos and Chargers do play again. But so you're talking a Ravens team over whom the Steelers have that hoodoo, or a Chargers team who they've played, but it feels very just coin flip, like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, just dim. Someone's head's gonna spring off, and could it be the Chargers? Sure. I can see the Steelers beating the Bills in the playoffs. Wow. To go on a run, you're asking it's like to use a cross sport analogy, you're asking somebody who doesn't hit 3-pointers to hit 3 in a row. Can you hit 1? Sure. Can you hit 2? Maybe. 3, it's like, dang, it's a lot. And Russell Wilson struggles in the red zone. The team allowing a fair bit of pressure, and just not a lot of margin for error. So I can see them winning 2 games, but no, I don't see it's an avenue to where they represent the AFC. I don't know if it's fair to say worst quarterback by far. You go through and it's if we're drafting AFC quarterbacks now, do I take Bo Nix ahead of Russell Wilson? just for experience, I don't know. Bo Nix is very confident, playing with confidence. But again, he just picked on a really, really vulnerable Falcons team. Looked serviceable against Kansas City, but
we have a pretty solid comparison of the two in similar circumstances.
Yeah, and in fact Russell Wilson had a little more because he had Jerry Jeudy. I think Denver's O-line's playing better this year, but
I think so. But if you're looking at what's the more promising and I think what's more consistently productive offensive operation, I'd take the Bo Nix operation over the Russell Wilson one. So I would lean that way. I don't think it's a long way if Nix is in there that Russell Wilson is the worst quarterback in the AFC. But to go on a run, I don't think you can look at those quarterback matchups over wild card weekend, divisional round, and then making your way into the conference championships. I have massive hesitations there for a team that has its obvious strengths. But again, we're playing against the best of the best there. I think to be overmatched at that position for that many weeks in a row, I can see them winning a game. Maybe they can string two together. But again, let's see where they finish in the seeding as well, because they'd likely have to hit the road in week 2 of the playoffs, even with a victory. So
unless the Broncos knock off the Bills, then
there you go. Which you're flying very strongly for. Okay, our last one here on an extended edition of the NFL Brekkie Show. We asked which team you trust, also on the Hot Trust hotline, which team you trust to actually find the correct tools to execute a rebuild out of the teams that seem bound for that kind of reboot and turning things over at the end of the season. And Oz just said, look, the team to trust on a rebuild is the one that hires Mike Vrabel. Vrabel, with his reputation, Phil, as a culture setter, and as someone who's going to get a team playing a committed, hard brand of football that's going to be assignment sound, that the defense is going to be taken care of. I actually think that the criticisms that leveled around Vrabel at the time of his rather surprising departure from the Titans, the criticisms around him in terms of how he viewed offense, I think they will have eased, not just because of time, but because of where offense is. I think Vrabel, you'd hope, would have gone away in the time that he's away and had a look at, okay, what are some new wrinkles I can look at, some new philosophies I can look at embracing and bringing into my fold on that side of the ball. But at the same time, hard-nosed running the football behind a good offensive line is not aging poorly in this year, 2024. So if you saw a team, let's pick realistic. I don't know that the Cowboys would opt for a personality like Vrabel, for better or worse. No. But if a Vrabel landed at a spot like the New York Jets, do you think that he would be that? Would you have faith that he could lead a rebuild there? That wherever he lands, he provides the best opportunity for one of these struggling teams to whip that thing around?
It's a quarterback-driven league. Jets need a quarterback. I think if Vrabel goes somewhere with an established quarterback, Dallas would be a good example. I just don't see that personality fit. Maybe a Chicago, if he has an offensive coordinator to come with, and I don't know if DeAndre Swift fits the Roshan Johnson. You get a couple things going there. Like,
what if the Cincinnati Bengals made a move with Zach Taylor?
Yeah, I mean it's harsh, but they've pulled themselves from the fire so many times. I'd be a little surprised if they let him go. But also it depends who's out there. I see in the comments Brad Bolt saying that Ben Johnson is Cincy as new head coach. Ben Johnson is going to be a coveted name for any team who has that young quarterback. I wouldn't see him staying in division with Chicago. But if you have the QB and you think you're a piece away, sure. I don't know. Chicago seems to be like a decent fit culturally for Vrabel.
Yep, certainly does.
But it's just, man, it feels like it's going to be hard to keep pace with those 3 other teams. I mean, I get the.
You're going to wonder if the pendulum in Chicago swings back the other way, as we see with head coaches quite often. You've gone and given commitment and time to a defensive coach, a defensive-led coach. Now you've got this investment on offense. Does the pendulum swing back towards, okay, now we want to go get someone offensively minded to tap into this investment that we've made?
But you also don't want to be the one holding the bag after Black Monday. Coaches get fired. You're looking at sexy coordinators, and Ben Johnson's not interested in staying in division, and Bobby Slowick's kind of his stars cooled off a little bit. And now it starts to get kind of lean for those sexy offensive names. I mean, unless like Brian Dable's fired and Chicago scoops him up quickly, that's a possibility.
It's not a season where that next apple off the McVay tree is just glaring in bright lights, or off the Shanahan tree is just glaring in bright lights, and is going to be ushered straight into the top of the head coaching masses. But look, it's an interesting one to consider. But Vrabel's going to be, I think Vrabel is going to sit there as one of these big names, big veteran names, along with Bill Belichick. Again, defensive minded, although Bill Belichick's mastery of football expands across every single side of the game, that are going to sit there looming above. And I think it's going to be a friendlier market for those type of names this time around, because you don't have those, outside of Ben Johnson, those offensive superstars, the minds, just screaming at the top of the page and on the top of everybody's call sheet.
All right, Laz, with that, it's now time for us to look ahead specifically to Week 12's opener. It is time for Popular Demand, brought to you by Tab. This game kicking off at 12:15 minutes after lunch, Friday on ESPN, preceded by a 45-minute edition of NFL Blitz. Laz, the Browns are home underdogs, giving 3.5. I think there's a little juice on the Browns side of things. Totals bounced around a little bit. It's been as high as 38.5, maybe even opened at 39.5. I've seen it as low as 35.5, currently 37.5. As we cautioned, you birdied 2 holes ago.
Okay.
And they got a little overzealous with a grip it and rip it last week, and 0 for 2 showing. I went 1 for 2. As a team, we are plus 259 on the year, 2.59 units. I am plus 392. You are minus 133. Would you like to lead off, or would you like to give me the honors?
No, I'll lead off. My question is, are there going to be more pass attempts from Jameis Winston or more points in this game? I might go with pass attempts. I've got Jameis Winston over 35.5 attempts at $2.05. Look, in all of his starts so far this season, he's gone past that number. I don't see this as a game where the Cleveland Browns will be earning a massive lead early on, something to, that they can stock away there and charge ahead. So I think that there's absolute merit and absolute reason that the Browns are going to have to try and chuck this thing about there with a run game on their side of things that hasn't really clicked into gear. I think it's been fair to expect that Nick Chubb in these circumstances, immediately returns to prime Nick Chubb form. But I think Jameis is going to have to throw this thing about. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the most efficient or overly explosive day for that Cleveland Browns offense, but 35.5 on the attempts is a little low. He's been at that 40 and above mark for a long time. And again, I think game script points to this being one where the Browns aren't going to be playing with a massive lead and in a position to just toe this thing, 5 points of contact, turn to the running game and chew up the clock.
Yeah, Laz, you and I agree on game script. My market I'm playing, but it's not my top 2 here, just to dovetail on what you said. Elijah Moore over 3.5 receptions at $1.90, I think presents terrific value. Last 3 games, Moore's been targeted just under 10 times per game, all Jameis Winston starts. If you're telling me he needs to catch 4 passes for $1.90, I think that's excellent value. But on the topic of game script, Cleveland's played 5 home games. They've led at the half in 0 of them. 4 of those, they've been down between 1 and 13 points at the half in those 5 home games. Pittsburgh, conversely, on the road, is very strong under Mike Tomlin. Cleveland's been kind of a rough spot for them recently. 4 losses in their last 6 trips there, only 1 win. They also had a tie. But this year, they're 3-2 against the number at halftime. Halftime number went up from 2.5 to 3. I liked 2.5 better than 3, but the super margin, first half super margin of 1 to 13 for Pittsburgh to lead by 1 to 13 at halftime pays $2.05. I mean, this has been the script. It's a couple Chris Boswell kicks. Maybe we'll get a Steelers touchdown. 10-7, 12 to 10 at the half. But either way, you tell me Pittsburgh's going to be leading at the half, but not blowing out the Browns, and I get plus money, $2.05, taking that.
on the Pittsburgh Steelers and their most prominent wide receiver weapon. I think when we look at this Browns defense of late, it has not been exactly locking down upon opposing wide receivers. Now, George Pickens has had a solid year. He's above 700 yards at this point of the season. Only 2 touchdowns, and I think that reverses course. Not much red zone productivity, and there's a couple of wrinkles there. There's been a couple of moments where we've had calls reversed, some close, foot tapping, ball security. There's been flags that have brought touchdowns back. But I think he gets on the board here at anytime touchdown for George Pickens at $2.75. You look at some of the names that have gone in for scores. There's some big body receivers, big body targets. I think when you look at the Chargers, Quentin Johnson got in, Josh Palmer got in against the New Orleans Saints, Juwan Johnson at the tight end spot, but a big body getting in there. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling can't stop scoring. He got in for a touchdown against the Browns as well. So you look in that form over the last month or so, and then look, the Bengals were able to produce the wide receiver spot as well with a productive day out there with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase getting into the end zone. So I think when you're looking at that talent level, you're looking at that size profile at the receiver spot, I think it's a good matchup against a Browns secondary that this is not a lockdown unit. This is a defense that's had perhaps unfair amount of stress placed upon them with the circumstances of the offense in the 2024 season. But alas, they have fallen off. You're still getting a great look. Myles Garrett is as great as ever, but the entire unit as a whole, this is far from the team that had grabbed headlines in previous seasons. And this is the greatest DVOA defense we've seen on record, or their EPA per play is ridiculous defensively. But yeah, so that unit doesn't present that challenge anymore. And specifically at that position, I think the touchdown scoring has been a bit of an anomaly for Pickens. I think that changes. $2.75 for Big George Pickens to get into the end zone.
I worry about Pittsburgh's productivity in the red zone.
It's scary.
I'm with you on Pickens having a day and having a significant influence. I don't know if I agree with him getting in the end zone, but if you told me he got a 30-yard touchdown, I'll take it, because my market is George Pickens' longest reception over 25 and a half yards. I played this last week against the Ravens. It hit. That pays $2.10 here. And that number, that 24, 25, 26 and a half, wherever you might see it, I love that number where it's at, because Pickens has gone over it in the last 5 games. This is Russell Wilson's favorite target. I think this market is similar here in the U.S. It's not like, I think Tab are missing the mark by any means. But I think as a whole, these books are looking at Pickens' season as a whole and how the Steelers are targeting Pickens, but not taking into account the moon ball that Russell Wilson loves to throw, and he trusts Pickens with it. Doesn't really trust it in plus territory either. It's kind of that middle of the field spot, but he's gone over it 5 straight times and 7 times in the last 8. And conversely, you look at the Browns, they gave up a longer catch than this easily to MVS last week. Quentin Johnson, similarly. Zay Flowers had a 44-yard catch the week before that. Jamar Chase had a catch way longer than this. A.J. Brown. You're just going on. Everybody seems to – you got to go back. I mean, it's something like 6 games before the Browns did not give up a pass longer than this. I looked at the same market for Russell Wilson, longer completion. That I thought was a sharper number. It was in the low 30s, so I'm staying away from that. But specifically George Pickens, Wilson's favorite deep ball target, over 25 and a half yards for his longest reception at $2.10. Laz, I feel like my Sunday Tiger. We're just going to keep it in the middle of the fairway, put the pressure on the opposition to play from behind, and cruise to a 16-stroke win at Pebble.
It has felt like that in recent seasons of popular demand. You do have a habit of getting out to a lead, and I need to pull out one too many miracles on the run home. But we're sitting here, we're almost plus 260 on the season. Another couple of weeks, find some form. We go, one of our patented 4 for 4 weeks, and we can be pushing that number back up towards 5, 6, 7+ units on the season. And then we've got our eyes on a big prize heading towards the playoffs. But I think last season, it was around this time of the year that we're in a real purple patch. We had about 10 to 12 weeks there where you absolutely wanted to be on these. And I'm looking forward in a game that, might not be high on points, be high on results for you and me.
Yep. So to recap, you like Jameis over his 35 and a half pass attempts.
Correct.
I like Elijah Moore over receptions, for the record, 3.5 at $1.90. But I was going plus. I wanted to go plus odds with both mine. You like Pickens anytime touchdown, big plus odds, $2.75. I like Pickens to catch a ball 26 yards or longer. And I like the Steelers to lead at the half between 1 and 13 points. Week 12, this game all gets underway from Cleveland at 15 minutes after noon, Friday on ESPN.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
Thank you, JT, for recognizing my announcer cadence on the disclaimer. Laz, that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Brekkie Show. From Phil's Mafia to yours. Thank you for watching, and keep it on ESPN's NFL pages for all things NFL as we now get to the 2/3 of the way through the regular season. And I will see you Friday at 11:30 with a live edition of NFL Blitz, leading us into Week 12's opener.